Somerville. My name's Ed Halloran. Welcome to the Somerville Labor Show. These shows just get better and better for me. I enjoy doing them, as you know. And we have a special guest in the studio here today. And I also want to welcome you guys to watch, anything on YouTube that we produce, as well as the Somerville Media Center here, because what we do is, I think it's different. I think it's rare. You're getting to have the ability to actually hear things that you haven't heard that's ongoing in the city when it comes to labor. And we all know that labor affects all of us in so many different ways because we spend most of our time there. The majority of our lives are circled around labor. And that's one of the reasons why I decided to do this show. So anyway, I want to introduce Mary Cassesso, who's here today. And this is, for me, it's a thrill because I just had the ability to meet you a couple of years ago. I know your sister really well, Ann, who's a member of the Somerville Municipal Employees Association. And she's just great and just a great union member. And I know you have a strong ties to your family, has strong ties to unions as well. But before I totally bring you into the conversation, I want to just say a little something about your bio. It's small, but it's extensive in my opinion. Mary Cassesso bio she's a former president of the CHA Foundation and chief community officer of the Cambridge Health Alliance, and that's a big job. Was a big job. Mary Cassesso has held a range of jobs throughout her impressive career, but they share common threads: healthcare, affordable housing, and education, all work done in public interest. And that was, believe it or not, that quote didn't come from me. That came from this magazine right here. Look, it looks really good on the screen, by the way. I'm looking at it right now. This is great. What I love about this is there was 40 people in the city of Somerville, right? And it was a 2016 Scout magazine article titled, "It Takes a Village," V-I-L-E, village, getting to know 40 local leaders who are shaping Somerville's future, by Emily Cassell, Eliza Rosenberry, and Catherine Rugg. And I wanted to mention their names because I think it was really important. And you were in this magazine.
You were too.
I was?
Yes.
I don't even know how I got in it. I mean, but it was a high honor for me. It's just community involvement, So look, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. And like I said, I got the ability to meet you. And by the way, Mary Cassesso ran for mayor 2 years ago, so I might as well start that right off, right?
Yes.
And that is a daunting task in itself. And I had the ability to speak to you and understand a little bit about you, not as much as I would have liked to at that particular point in time, but it led me to have a conversation with you, and you graciously accepted to come on the show, which you probably don't do these at all, and but it's nice to have you here.
Thank you.
So I want to talk a little bit about the first thing I want to start with, because in your life, community activism is like big, right? Mm-hmm. And I myself get pulled into it. So many of us do. One thing I took away and I learned about you, mostly important, was that your family's always been involved in the community, mm-hmm. No matter what happens or what's going on in the city of Somerville. And so is that how it started for you?
Yes, Ed. My entire extended family lived in Somerville. There wasn't a street in the nunnery grounds that didn't have a relative. Mm-hmm. So we were well watched over. But the family was very active. East Somerville was the poorest neighborhood and remains the only, I don't know if it's even fair to say the affordable neighborhood any longer in mm-hmm. Somerville. Mm-hmm. We'll talk a little bit more about East Somerville later, I'm sure, and some of the changes. Mm-hmm. But yes, growing up, my grandmother was the matriarch of the family. She had 7 kids. Most of them lived in the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And we were brought up to really care about your neighbors and your community. And if you didn't, bad things would happen. Mm-hmm. So it was just really natural that whether it was extended family, and I was a kid, so I don't get credit for what my relatives taught me, but I continued. Mm-hmm. Whether it was the formation of the East Somerville Health Center, which later became part of Cambridge Health Alliance, mm-hmm. that was started by not only several family members. I was a teenager, but I went along, I was a volunteer there, and other neighbors, because there was no health care in East Somerville, which was, as I said, one of the poorer sections of the city of Somerville. Or I wore my United Farm Workers shirt because we also
I'm glad you wore
would
that.
picket in front of Star Markets, boycotted gala wine, grapes, and iceberg lettuce because the working condition of the farm workers was just absolutely awful.
Oh,
and
yeah.
so my entire family was involved and remain involved in the
It's kind
farm
of like a
workers.
farm. They did like a farm aid thing out of that too, I think.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. So, and conditions for migrant workers continue to be an issue. And then last and probably most relevant and important was how well we organized against the elevated I-93 structure. We didn't win. The decision was made without even neighborhood input. And as a result, I will say there's an event tomorrow night at the Mystic Housing Development on environmental justice. But the number of people included in my own family that had serious health issues as a result of the small dust particles and all the work that Doug Brugge has written about, and many people.
I had Doug on this show.
Yes.
I had Doug on this show with his daughter. They were wonderful. She actually, she has like a hip hop rap thing
Yeah,
that she
she's
did.
a
That was
singer.
very cool. Yeah, Doug was very good guest. Talk about particles in the air. I
Yeah.
had the book. We had him on the show.
Yeah.
That was a good take too.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I agree with him on that one.
So we were just taught that you had to get involved, you had to advocate, you had to fight if you wanted a community that was healthy, that was inclusive, that was caring for neighbors, kind and respectful to one another. So that was.
And that, so then it all evolves from there.
Yes.
Obviously,
Yes.
You went from boycotting grapes, right, and lettuce, and then you had the I-93. Now, there was a section that was taken out of there. There were houses. People actually lost their homes.
And when I think about affordable housing, and the fact that 2- and 3-family houses were starter houses for families, we lost in the nunnery grounds 7 houses on each side of the street and about 6 streets, maybe even more. And that doesn't include what the Mystic section lost. So we lost a lot of what was affordable housing in our neighborhoods. That wasn't ever replaced.
Yeah, and people were in a panic over that. I know that. I remember growing up as a young boy, what was going on with all of that. One thing I want to talk about, and we'll go to affordable housing right now too, we might as well, because it's perfect for what we're talking about. Safety net services. You've said that before to me when we had a conversation. I don't hear it that often, so I'm trying to, maybe you can educate the audience on what that term is and what it means to you.
Well, in my mind, it reflects your well-being overall. Do you have housing? Do you have food on the table? Do you have a good job? Is there educational and training opportunities? So it's your basic service needs that I truly believe is the business of government. And of course, healthcare, because I talked about the formation of the Somerville Health Center, because we did not have a place for people to go for primary care needs and other needs. So it's those basic services that if people don't have them, they can't be healthy.
So that sums that up. The safety net makes, and even now, like after COVID, there's still probably a lot of it going on out there. Incredibly important to have that in the city. So I'm glad. Now, back in the 70s and 80s, now you worked for the Dukakis administration, right?
After I worked for Gene Brown, I have to say, my boss, he was actually in that scout as one of the
He's a great guy.
He is.
Yeah, I always wanted to have him on. I mean, he's such a good
He'll
guy.
do it.
I know he'll do it. I know he's wonderful. I mean, I bump into him in a lot of places.
Yeah.
Not recently since COVID, but I absolutely do. So I want to. Was it the late 70s, early 80s, and you got involved with the Dukakis? How did that happen?
Well, I first worked for Gene Brown, and we had been active in city politics for some time. In fact, many members in my family were supporters of rent stabilization back then and others. So, you know, what goes around comes around. And so some of these issues, although I think we've lost ground in the area of affordable housing, and I think now we have some opportunity to make it up a little. But I worked for Gene Brune on his campaign, and he offered me a position in human services. I stayed there for a year, and I worked really hard. I did the first information and referral directory of all social services in the city of Somerville so that people could figure out and navigate the services they needed. I thought that was an important project.
Absolutely.
Of course, now it would all be online, but it was actually...
Well, that was before we had,
yeah,
you know...
yeah, that was before, yeah.
We had computers, we have the internet and 5G, right?
Then Gene asked me to go down to the Council on Aging. There had been some problems, and at the time, the city of Somerville operated a health center, the 60-plus health center. And Hazel Hughes, who has an award at SCC, worked with me at the Council on Aging. And we really expanded the Council on Aging. I worked hand in hand with Somerville Cambridge Elder Services, worked with the Transportation Services, and did a great job. It was one of the first picnics. Remember the elder picnics that used to have in our powerhouse? Yes.
You know, they still have them. So.
Yep, I was only there about a year, and Gene had a problem. He wanted to build a new high school, or at least part of the high school. And in order to do that, you have to sell municipal bonds. And you can only sell municipal bonds and get rated for how strong your city is financially if your books are up to date. Right. Well, Somerville's books were 3 years behind. They were all done manually.
Oh boy!
And so he asked me would I serve as the city auditor, that was my last position in Somerville. I was there, I don't know, 6 or 7 years. I loved that work. We automated not only all of the financial systems of the city of Somerville, but the water department, everything.
Yeah.
We brought the records up to date. We were able to go to New York, present to Moody's and S&P and get a rating. It was a lot of work. I raced over it. So I had the government bug in the commitment to good quality, accountability, efficient and effective services. I loved Somerville, and Somerville's always been good to me.
Right.
I got recruited to the Dukakis administration. I first served at the Department of Employment and Training. So again, a safety net.
Okay, yeah, there you go, there you go.
Employment and training, and then worked in housing for a number of years with Amy Anthony, whose son lives here in Somerville and his wonderful family. But Dukakis was one, I loved and stay friendly with Michael and Kitty Dukakis. But he was one of the last leaders in the state that invested heavily in affordable housing. There were all kinds of programs.
What, can you give me a few? What was he doing back then? I mean, can we bring some of them back, or is it just too late?
Well, we can. You know, back then it was everything. It was preserving some of the public housing units. The state actually put more money in. And I always think of housing developments, public housing developments, or expiring use projects that Cobble Hill was in Clarendon. It's like your house. You can't once invest in it and improve it and never do it again. And that's sometimes what we do in public service. In fact, we see some of the problems in the T, you know, with the maintenance. You know, 20, 30 years go by and you don't improve upon it. So there was more investment in affordable housing. And don't forget, during all the Republican presidents, the federal government got out of the housing business. And after Michael Dukakis, in my mind, the state got out of the housing business. So resources, bond bills that were available for more creating and preservation of affordable housing dried up. Innovation that Amy Anthony, my boss and mentor, because mentors make such a huge difference in your life. There were the expiring use projects. There were more vouchers. And Ed, this will give you an idea of how much things change. When I worked for Michael Dukakis, the most affordable place in the greater Boston area was the South End. And we see how things have changed. And Somerville was affordable, not so much anymore.
It was, and it's not anymore. It's been unaffordable for 20 years now.
Yeah.
Really amazing. So 20% inclusionary zoning is something that the city currently has, right? And I guess that has to do with, you know, if you're building 10 units, 20% of it has to be at least, you know, affordable, right? Now, we have a member who has had the ability to take advantage of that, which is really nice, has a family and all of that, so I'm really excited about that, which is great. But, you know, my friends, my coworkers, I've got family that live right over the hill here on Adrian Street. My mom's down there, in a three-family still. It's just, you know, like that term, the rent is too damn high, right? And we need to get out of this somehow, or we need to kind of stop the bleeding. And tell me what you think is needed in the city of Somerville. Where could we start? I know there's things that our current mayor is doing right now.
Yes.
I do know that. But I think from your perspective, and I'm sure that Katjana has put everything she has out there, and she's told people what she's going to be doing. But what is it that you would like to see? Because I know you're always concerned about people. I know that. I mean, you really are, and I feel the same way.
And there are some new programs because we're fortunate enough to have more resources with the ARPA funds, et cetera. But the reality is it becomes really hard to make up for 20, 30 years of not investing in housing. And back then, housing, in fact, Dukakis had a cabinet secretary, and now Maura Healey's doing that again because it underscores the importance of affordable housing. If people don't have a roof over their head, they can't deal with other issues in their lives, obviously. We talked about three families. One of the programs I always think about that we are an opportunity that we should take more advantage of. As you know, when families live in 2 and 3 family homes, they care more about the tenant, not about the amount of rent that they're getting. They want it to be affordable. They want a good tenant. They want to do their share. That's the way it always worked in the neighborhood. I think a small thing, because you have to do a lot of things when you're this far behind, is reward those property owners. Because for them, it becomes harder to invest in your property and maintain, like we talked about, public housing. You need investment always, but do something for those people that own maybe one house, maybe 2 houses, so like that are making rents affordable.
Right, so example, like my mom, right?
Yes.
So if you have a 3-family and I think all people really want, they want to have good tenants and have a good relationship, and as a family, what they call a 3-family, right? I mean, when I was in Somerville here, in that same house, I had my grandmother on one floor. I had my mom on. We lived with my mother, and I had my great grandmother on the first floor. So that's really what it was all about back then. I know we're never going to be able to bring that back, but I think what you're saying is that, and if I'm wrong, let me know. But now some people would rather maybe charge a little less money to get good tenants. And is there a way? And is there anything to give? But is there anything to give back to the property owners who live in their 3-family? Like some kind of a break.
Yeah, I think you could explore abatements or grant programs for improvements in the house. You could also look at, because some people decide not even to rent out a unit if they live in a 2-family because they're just afraid of being a property owner. I think there could be more education and training on that, and more assistance, supportive services, so that those units come back on the market and make that available. Creation of affordable housing, which is so needed, and so much more money is needed to put into the creation, and to have more home ownership programs to build wealth. But at least on the short term, get the low-hanging fruit up and going. So those are just a couple of ideas.
I know someone said this to me before. It might have been Mary in Houston years ago, but someone was looking for an over 55 community in the city of Somerville, or something like that, for people, not someplace, but a nice.
Well, other communities have done them very successfully. Plymouth, for one, but Somerville is so expensive to build in right now. And my gosh, if we're going to talk about health and about services, older adults have so many challenges, and shame on us as a society that that's the best that we can do after someone has contributed so much in their lives.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, we see a lot of it, and people living in, like I think we talked about, some people may be living in a basement, or it's not a good place for them to be.
It must be a healthy environment.
Yeah, exactly.
People need
Exactly.
a roof over their head, but you don't want them to end up with a chronic condition
No.
because
So let me move into, this is a tagline that drives me crazy, right? Somerville's a great place to live, work, and play, right? Or Somerville leads the way to live, work, and play. I love Somerville just like you do, but I don't, and I work here, right? 30 years, DPW. I don't feel the vibe. It can be, but it's a huge challenge. I mean, I've got not almost, but half of our members don't live in the city, and they can't afford to be here, okay?
So the affordability doesn't just hit people that on a low income. Now Somerville's eliminating the middle class.
I'm with you on that one.
You can't afford.
Yeah, you're right. So
workforce, especially the folks that are the teachers in our city, firefighters in our city, the municipal workers at the public works, because we all want clean streets and we all don't want those potholes. Yeah. But people have been priced out of the market. If they didn't buy, I was lucky. I bought my house when I was young, and I'll tell you why. My mother was a single mother, and her family didn't want her to buy a house. They were so worried that she wouldn't be able to afford to buy a house that we lived in one of my grandmother's 3-family apartment, had really affordable rent. But my mother always knew that buying would be more advantageous. So, and she did when she was in her 60s. I had to co-sign for her because, the banks want to make sure you're going to work for 30 years and pay a mortgage. But we need more home ownership opportunities for workforce housing. So that's another really important. And if we ever want to begin to respond to fairness, related to redlining, diversity, inclusion, et cetera. We need to do so much more on ownership.
Racial equality.
It was really exciting hearing about Cambridge's RISE program where, now again, this goes back to really low income, single women with kids, that they'll be getting a $500, I think only 2,000 families involved, but $500 a month unattached. Now, some people, because I remember when we talked about that related to, instead of having food markets, I started a free one in Revere with many of my colleagues at Cambridge Health Alliance.
And you're currently on the board for Food for Free. I
I'm doing the walk for hunger for them on Sunday.
I love it. I had to put that in. I'm sorry.
No, thank you. Thank you, because they're here now in Somerville. They're just by Tom Ben's place.
We interviewed them. They were here. They were great.
Good. Yes, it's a great organization.
Yeah, they were great.
It does really great work.
Let me ask. I finish your thought though.
I don't remember my thought now.
Oh, good. So what I want to say is middle class, right? Now, if you look at the census in the city of Somerville, right? For me, it's all over the map because I get confused when I look at it sometimes. But one thing that's very clear to me is that people are making a lot of money to live here, right? 6 figures, 200, 250,000 and up, whatever. That's in my world, that's a lot of money. Now, for people like me, or if there's a younger couple that wants to live in the city, and let's say they make 80,000, 90. But what I'm saying is that why can't a program, in the city be created for that? Because I think the cap is it's too low. I mean,
the bottom line is there needs to be more resources. And that's why there are things like transfer taxes, linkage fees, et cetera.
Right.
That's why sometimes there's tension in creating affordable housing. And I'm going to tell you this as a union member, because I remember advocating always for North Street, the Clarendon Hill section, and all that renovation.
That was a big deal.
Yes, and people wanted the market rates to have union workers, but not the affordable, because they can't make the margins.
It was a prevailing wage.
More money is needed to do more affordable housing.
I believe there was a prevailing wage issue that went along with
Yes.
that too.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to, if it wasn't going to be unions, they want a prevailing wage to be paid.
Absolutely,
Right,
yes,
right. So that's
yeah.
what they were looking for.
Yeah.
It's just some fairness, you know. That's
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
what they're
But
looking at.
see, that's why sometimes people doing great work end up being pitted against one another when in fact they're not the issue, and what they're advocating for isn't. It's that we haven't put sufficient resources in. And I would further say, related to affordable housing, a lot of the housing, the market rate and even affordable, smaller units, 1, 2 bedroom, we need some 3 and 4 bedroom houses for families too.
Yeah,
And
why
that's
not?
not being created quite as
Well,
much.
but was it a Generation Z? I was reading in the Globe about they're moving in. People are moving in together so they can survive.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
becoming.
Well,
even more.
when I worked for Jean Bruin at the Council on Aging, I started a program called Share a Home.
Really?
And my idea was, I know, I was in my
never heard that
20s,
one.
and I thought, yes, share a home. I thought it was great. It was for elders or anyone who lived alone in a really big house and had many rooms, and it was becoming unaffordable. Would they want a roommate?
Like a
Someone
bed and
older?
breakfast kind of thing, but
Well,
not
no,
quite.
they were really like roommates,
Oh,
kind
okay.
of, or, you know, someone who may have needed some help with laundry or other things. So it was matching people where they were and what their needs were.
Did it get off the ground at all? Or?
Well, I told you I only stayed 1 year at Council on Aging. You know, it's being talked about again, and it has been in the past years.
How about that?
It still is something really
Wow.
innovative. But I want to give the city of Somerville a plug. We do a lot in affordable housing. The problem is we're not gaining ground that we need.
Too many years have gone by.
Too many years. It wasn't our fault, as I said, at the federal level, at the state level, and now catch up. That's why we have to also preserve and protect besides create, because that pipeline takes
It's like this
so
everywhere.
long.
I mean, New York is. I think I saw something about New York, and people are running to Florida, they're just vacating and just getting out of certain areas.
Well,
you
I've
know?
been reading some of Senator Pat Jalen's articles about some of the debates about, you know, should some of the surplus in Massachusetts go back to the folks at what level, and, you know, people who say a lot of wealthier residents of the city are leaving, of the state leaving, and I'm not sure all of that data is borne out. You know, when you have a chance for equity, to start addressing more fairness, more equity, more, you know,
Well, it's pretty deep, though. It's pretty
healthcare,
deep with
yeah.
Maura Haley. This millionaires tax thing that occurred, that is definitely going to be changing people's minds, and those who have money, what they're doing, and they may be fleeing as well. That might be a lot of what's going on now.
I think it's less than Massachusetts is a great state to live in. It's expensive, but a lot of places are. Do you want to move and live in Florida?
I don't
No, I
know. It depends on where I would go. I wouldn't live there.
But we're talking community, and
visit.
some of the issues
Yeah.
in the state of Florida, and whether it's books in the libraries. I mean, there's
No, I
some
know.
craziness going on.
It's definitely different.
frightening.
So one thing I want to get back to.
Yes, sorry.
I want to talk a little bit about an issue that's a hot button issue that's been going on for a long time. And look at Cambridge had rent control.
Yeah.
Rent control was in a lot of different places, and now it's cropping up again.
Yeah.
We're beginning to hear it all over again, okay? The question I'm going to ask you here, it's a broad question, but you can answer it the way you would normally want to. Is some form of rent control needed? Some type of rent control, or is it just too drastic to even think about? It's the word rent control is just
That's why I like to
issue.
say rent stabilization.
Yeah, right.
Because it's about stabilizing so that people will have places to live.
Mm-hmm.
I think Michelle Wu has done a pretty good job juggling the needs, because we know whether it's affordable housing creators or just market housing, if you do something so drastic that it shuts off that market, those funds are necessary to support the affordable housing. So I think she found some balance, but I do think we need some rent stabilization. It was an issue on the campaign trail, of course. And what I always said about it is that, because I had been in town advocating for lots of, whether it was linkage, I was always advocating. I worked on the CPA so that we could have more money for affordable housing, and that gave us a big boom. But you need to find, you've got to get the support from the state legislature, and that's what I always said when I talked about it. Now, Maura Healey has talked about, usually it has to be the entire State House has to vote in support of it, and that's not going to happen, and we knew that didn't happen in the past and wouldn't. But if you do it city by city and by town, it is possible, and that there are communities poised and ready. Somerville's always worked. I think Ben Ewan-Campen just about a week ago started talking about what that
Well, if that's something,
look like.
so that's something for the city council and the mayor to have a discussion
and
on.
with Maura Healey continuing to be supportive, I think some communities are going to need some stabilization or they're going to, Somerville could end up just, you talked about this six-figure salary earners, but yet the kids at the high school, they still have roots in the city and they aren't rich. The Somerville we love includes everybody, and we don't want that to go away.
It's
so
really,
you have to take some initiatives.
That's a hard question that I asked you, in my opinion, because
but
it's just so.
But I answered, and I think we do need something.
What about the Affordable Housing Trust Fund 1990? What about that? Talk about that.
Jean Brune established that, but I think it passed under Capuano because it was just as Jean was leaving. It was started in '89, and I think passed in '90. I asked to be on the Affordable Housing Trust Fund because, that was a common theme. I knew we were poor growing up with a single mother. I knew that we were able to live in good housing because my grandmother owned a house and she would keep our rents affordable. So I always knew the importance of having affordable housing. So I have served on that since its inception. So what's that, 33 years now. I will say the other thing I want to talk about when we talk about housing is the unhoused population in East Somerville has grown a lot. And that's another area that we have to address and do more. We need to have a warming center. We need to have more shelter space in the community. The numbers are up. East Somerville, lots of time, those of us who grew up there feel like it takes longer to address the issues. Connexion has done excellent work in East Somerville.
Is this because of the pandemic too? Is that just like,
I think the pandemic had some awful consequences for people losing their job. And, we'll talk about unions at some point, mental health. This is Mental Health Month. And Surgeon General keeps talking about loneliness, too, being one of the factors that interfere with people's well-being and mental health. But yes, I think for sure, but I don't think necessarily, because sometimes there's comorbidities with people. They're unhoused, they might have mental health issues, they might have a substance use issue. And so all kinds of wraparound and supportive services are necessary, but people can't be out on the streets.
No, I mean, it's really,
basic right
it's difficult, it's really difficult to see it too. And I mean, I was in Davis Square working today, and I seen a young lady who was talking to someone who looked like they needed help, and there's people stop by and they say hello, and I mean, I have I know what that's like because my dad became homeless, later on in life. And it was just a terrible thing that happened that way, and it's difficult to deal with. And I think he got the help that he needed, and there were really good people out there. He was a wonderful person, great guy, and just
sometimes
if you work in a factory your entire life, right? These things can happen.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
It's not like
some people paycheck to paycheck. People make choices about not getting their medication because they don't have enough money. Or when we were doing, I still volunteer at Cambridge Health Alliance a lot. I'm on their foundation, but I also do the vaccines besides the free produce money. When we would give out those gift cards, whether it was $25 or $75, whole families would come and say, we didn't know how we were going to eat this month.
Unbelievable.
Getting these,
it's really hard. That's heartbreaking to hear that. Let me ask you a question, because we're getting a little towards the end here.
Yes.
How did the pandemic affected everybody in so many different ways, right? I always like to ask the guests about the pandemic. Now, timeline now. We're 3 years after the pandemic began in March of 2019.
19,
right? Yeah.
yes.
Amazing. So here we are. And how did it affect you personally? And what were some of the things that?
I was working at Cambridge Health Alliance at the time, and I was working 7 days a week, walking into the office, and frantic about the fact that there wasn't protective equipment, personal protective equipment. We started with all the wonderful Somerville neighbors a mask making so that we could
I recall that.
workers. We could protect Linda Cornell from the VNAs. She had no PPE, so we started having all families making masks. We were picking up, collecting them,
There
distributing
was a
them
lady
to
on your
people.
up in
Renee Scott was organizing
there was a whole
lot of
yeah, I remember
there was
that.
a whole group of people, and I would bring all of those masks, distribute them. We were distributing food 7 days a week. On the weekends, I would do rounds at the hospital to visit both the people that had COVID, but also our staff who weren't sure what was going to happen. We set up facilities at Tufts so people could sleep there because you didn't want to bring infection. So that was how it affected me. That's what made me run for mayor. It was that public health vision, and I worked regionally and still do a lot, and we have to, whether it's housing or anything. We live in a regional world. We cross borders and boundaries all the time, and we have to work together to solve problems. The one upside is much more awareness by everyone about inequities, unfairness. And I think that's like Food for Free, their fundraising numbers were up. A lot of entities that worked to make certain people were safe, they had food, etc. More people understood inequities and realized they needed to do something more.
And people gave.
People gave.
People gave, and they really did. And I felt, even when I would go and get something, a curbside pickup, whatever, try to give more, do more, and help people who needed it. You just felt that way.
Especially the workers, and the healthcare workers, we got a lot of recognition. But those kids at Market Basket, people, Sarah, who just closed 789, which she was giving us cheesecakes, but I couldn't tip enough, and we have to continue to give great tips to people that work in service areas or get them unionized.
Just to let you know, we have a lot of municipal, I'm glad you said this, there's a lot of municipal employees as well that rolled right through this pandemic, and kudos to them, amazing work, and you know what, we like to, look, we have a job to do, and we do it. Money's always secondary, but I want to talk a little bit about a union town. I want to talk about Somerville because it was a blue-collar town, factory workers, seamstress, whatever. There were so many different, I remember so much of it. And municipal unions, and now we have coffee shops being organized, right? There's unions. So we've got the Forge.
Jen and
Block 11, right? We've got
Jen
that.
and Tucker, they were in
and the Diesel. We got the Diesel. Diesel Cafe in Davis Square. All
with
owned,
their support and advocacy.
Right. So I think they're all owned by the same people as well.
The three Block, Diesel, and Forge are all owned by Jen Parker and Tucker Lewis.
Okay, so exactly, and they're in this magazine, right?
Yeah, they're in that.
They're in the Scout. Great. So here are people who want to see unions, right? They want people to be unionized. They want them to have just cause. They want them to have rights, and they want them to have a competitive pay. Isn't that a wonderful thing? It's just a wonderful thing when you think about it. So now we've got Starbucks workers up here who are looking to be unionized. And I don't know if they had their vote or they're going to have a vote, but they had something called a sip-in, where people went out and they hung out and they held signs and all of that. Please allow these people to unionize. I interviewed a Starbucks gentleman here, great guy. He's working really hard to get this done. So we're hoping.
You know how hard it is for people on their salaries to afford their rent and food? It needs
and the other thing,
better benefits. They need better wages, fairer wages. And it deals with diversity and inclusion because it's it's younger people starting out, multicultural backgrounds and all else.
And we have a crisis in the city right now where it's really difficult for people to hire, right? So Starbucks is paying a little bit more money, which is great. I mean, of course, tipping's always a big part of it, right? Even the people who I represent in the Somerville Municipal Employees Association, we, and this is not, I'm not appealing to anybody about anything here. It's not what I'm trying to do. But what's important is that we need now, after this pandemic, to be brought, up to where a level where we can, affordability for us. It's happening all over the place now.
Well, the pandemic really made me understand clearer. Because you mentioned all my family have been in unions. I was management from when I started out with Gene Broom. But the importance of even having the benefits, the health benefit, some sick time, some vacation time,
it's great.
Sufficient resources to be able to provide for their families.
Well, that's what brought me. My son was just a baby. That's what brought me in, because I'm like, I need health insurance, and I'm not going to make a lot of money. I'm fine with that. I just want to be able to take care of my wife and my son.
You take pride in your work.
Oh, absolutely, of course. When I first started for the city, I was a pretty good trash man, right? We trash and recycle, and we did all of that. And 30 years later, I'm still working out there in the street and doing the best I can.
But helping others too, to make certain things are fair and equitable. So
absolutely.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Continue to care enough.
Yeah. Well, that's what it's all about, in my opinion. So unions, they're usually met with resistance when we try to organize them. Usually, I don't know why that happens. I guess if somebody were to come in your place of business and say, listen, we're going to tell you how to run your business with employees. You know what I'm saying? Because if they're not treated properly, then we're going to file a grievance or whatever. And people take, they don't really like it. So I'm going to tell you, here's what unions do. Okay, they balance employer market power. They raise wages for all workers. They promote equal pay for all workers. They help shrink racial and gender wage gaps. And this is a list that we're running through here. They help improve benefits and scheduling, create safer workplaces, and we certainly do. What's wrong with that, right? And reduce economic inequality. And the challenges some workers are facing who do not have a union, little or no pension or retirement, and adequate health care. We talked about that, right? No voice in decisions about scheduling, promotions, discipline, etc. Discrimination, favoritism, harassment, health, safety, aggressive management interference. So that's the list.
Those are all critical to someone's well-being, to being able to afford life. And retirement, and no retirement benefits, to me, is one of the scariest things ever. And then this constant threat of Medicare.
It's very scary.
Will it last? Will it not last? It's essential.
I mean, people thinking about retiring, I don't think that that's even realistic in the way things are for people. I just don't think it's realistic. I think you can retire if you want to get away from your current situation, but you're probably going to have to work. You're going to have to balance it out somewhere. That's the way it's going to be. So you spend a lot of time in the city, right? And you ran for mayor a couple of years ago, which is, it's a daunting task for anybody, and I think you've experienced that. Tell me, it doesn't have to be a long list, just a couple of things. So what are some of the major issues that you believe must be addressed in the city of Somerville? We talked about affordable housing. Is there anything else that you're looking at that's concerning to you?
Well, part of the affordability of housing or dealing with unhoused, that needs to happen right away. We need to have more shelters. We need to have more places. And, we have a land trust now. What properties the city own or businesses own that have been vacant, that you need to faster be able to respond to these problems. I can't believe that in this country, and this isn't a city issue, that anybody should ever go hungry. So it's wonderful that the free lunches are back on the table, but that worries me. That's why I'm on the food for free board. And again, I'll say all the safety nets are employment and training, mentoring people. Huge.
Employment training. It's. We don't have a lot of time left, unfortunately. I apologize, but thinking about training and employment and apprenticeships, right? It's a great concept. It's done in many different places, right? But it's got to be done right. And you've got to find a place for mom or dad who are going to be taking on that new job, right? And they have children, and where are they going? We got to take care. That's huge, right? They talked about that during the pandemic. Childcare, how are we going to deal with that? And so we want to be able to get them, want to be able to train them, give them all the support that they need, so we can bring them in.
We need to do more in employment and training and career paths. We also need more businesses in this city and everywhere stepping up. I know Tom Ben's always done a lot in engineering. We take kids from the high school at Cambridge Health Alliance. I still say we am on the foundation, I can say that. Growing up, I didn't have a mentor, and so I made decisions myself about school, and so I only applied to schools that were in Boston because I felt like I shouldn't ask to live someplace because I shouldn't get any money I needed to be local and live at home. Having a mentor made all the difference in the world when I started my career, someone like Amy Anthony. And I realized that was probably the craziest thing, and it's better to ask for and move away. But as a result of having mentors who really shaped, I was the first one in my family to go to college, so it was all new for me. But long story short, I always take the time to help anyone looking for advice with their career, looking for a new job. And what I ask them, and I've done this for all of my career, so I have hundreds of people in this network of mine, do it for someone else, pay it forward, make certain you're available to someone. Advice, looking for a job, etc.
You just gave me an idea now. Now I have to talk to Yvette about this though, but a call-in show, right, where someone can actually call in, right, and you can give them free advice on the air live.
Oh, that's good.
That might not.
Yeah. Well, because people are shy about it, and a lot of people don't stop and take the time. And I always say, what goes around comes around.
Right.
We've all been there when we're looking for our next
Exactly.
step.
I want to
ask. It's rewarding for the person that does it.
I want to ask you another question.
Yes.
Single payer healthcare, Medicare for all.
Yeah.
Is it realistic? Can it be done? Do you like it?
It's so entrenched with business and insurance companies, but should it be done? Absolutely. Would it lead to more equity in healthcare? Would it lead to more people not having to decide, I think I'll only take half my diabetes medicine because I don't have enough money for it?
Yeah, that's crazy.
Medicare works fine.
That's completely
with
crazy.
the government being the single payer. It's expensive. But when you take all that other... all that bloated bureaucracies of insurance companies, I think we could do it better. We could do it cheaper. We could have a healthier.
This is gonna. Well, I don't. Sometimes I really get concerned when government's involved with healthcare insurance and things like that. Of course, I'm with the GIC, the Group Insurance Commission. I'm fine with it. I'm happy to have whatever I have. You know what I'm saying? But I always get concerned once government gets involved with
but
it.
They do it for Medicare, and they do a good job.
Yeah.
And,
I
people
agree.
aren't denied or prevented. You have an existing condition, and you go to a new job, and they don't want to cover you. I mean, and we pay so much.
Yeah.
So
it's expensive. It's expensive to retire because you have to. My mom been doing it for years now. Okay, it costs her a lot of money to keep what she has. So I want to talk just real quick to close out the show about maybe a mentoring kind of a thing, because it's grooming people. I go to these meetings, and you've gone to these meetings that I met you with some will stand together meetings or whatever, and I'm like, I don't see a lot of younger people here, and I'm wondering why we don't see it, and what type of a person does it take to have to want to get involved in your community and stay with it, like doing what you've done for your entire life. I mean, we're not asking for like 500 Mary Casessos, right? We're not asking for that, but we are asking for people to come out and get involved in their community, even if it's a small part of what,
There are some young people involved in housing because it's an issue that affects them directly. We don't have the family structure with, in Somerville, everybody's cousin. I mean, just on my street, a family could make up a Relivio game that was huge. I mean, Yeah,
it's a big family.
But so I think if it's lived experiences, get people more involved. I think the pandemic has had such an impact on mental health. There's not enough services. A provider, I said it's Mental Health Month. NAMI is such an incredible organization that I participate in.
Acronym
for a National Association for Mental.
Okay.
They had a suicide line before there was a universal one. And Donna Marsh, who does things at Mass Association for Mental Health. I mean, there's some incredible organizations out there, but we haven't had enough providers. We need more providers. We also have to look at providing care differently. We've done training when I was at CHA of community health workers, a career track for people that could get them in good paying jobs in healthcare, and then we need not to keep feeding. We've got to do it differently. Do you know, I feel like we've done better work. I do a lot in oral health because I was at Harvard for 20 years. In third world countries in providing oral health than we have in this country at times. It's not integrated into your overall care. So sometimes we just need to shake it up.
Well, great points, but when I go to a meeting next time, I want to see some younger people show up with some fresh ideas.
Let's try to invite.
Well, I don't want to see a disconnect between, the older generation. I mean, I think we need to really blend in and get this done for racial social justice. Women in the workplace, that's another issue that I've always been concerned about. Pay equality, homelessness, we just talked about that. Now, I'm going to close this out with one little quick thing here. Diane Wong, who's wonderful, has got her own show, does great work. And she sent me something, but we had a Labor Spring teach-in at the library on the 26th of April at the Somerville. It was well attended, and it was community leaders, some activists there. And what she wrote, here's what she said. She said, it will be on an upcoming Somerville Labor Show, which it will be, you'll be able to see it. The presentation was great, discussing a clear vision to engage stakeholders in Somerville that include low-income and minority residents, as well as big businesses, developers, and well-sourced members of the community to come together and find ways to maintain the Somerville that we love and ensure that it is a community that demands justice, dignified treatment, and fair living union wages for all citizens.
That's right. But don't forget, Ed, we're talking about some people have to work 2 and 3 jobs without benefits. How can they go to meetings and advocate
that's
for
why,
what they need?
Yeah, so, that's how I got wrapped up into doing what, I was just like.
Cass has a lot of wonderful young people. Somerville Community Corporation, that I love the 100 Homes program. I forgot to plug it. That to me was an innovation. Buying up some of the 3-family, 4 families in Somerville was huge and more.
Well, now somebody beat everybody else to it now, unfortunately, because these developers, it's amazing.
Sorry, I know we're trying to
that's
squeeze
fine.
in a lot here.
Yeah, there's a lot.
It's all important.
But I want to, you know what, is it McGraw, Tim McGraw? Yeah, it's a country guy, right? He plays a lot of music. He's wonderful. And I heard the song the other day, and I'm like, I don't know where I've been, because I've never heard it. But then I wanted to see the lyrics of it. So I picked out some of the lyrics. I'm not going to sing it. I'm going to read it, because you don't want to hear me sing. So it's called Humble and Kind. So I want to close the show with this, because you are humble and you are a kind person. And I want to thank you very much for being on the show. It says, so when the dreams you're dreaming come to you, when the work you put in is realized, let yourself feel the pride, but always be humble and kind. Don't expect a free ride from no one. Don't hold a grudge or a chip, and here's why. Bitterness keeps you from flying. Always stay humble and kind. Don't take for granted the love this life gives you when you get where you are going. And don't forget to turn back around and help the next one in line. Always be humble and kind.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's a beautiful song, and I heard it, and I says, I have to bring this and do it.
I think you'll find those 40 people you included and some we mentioned all interesting to interview, because I think that...
I never thought of doing that, but
I'd get every one, last one of them.
I pulled this magazine out. It's wonderful. It's older. It's 2016. But, these people really were giving back to the community. And I'm not plugging myself. You plugged me, right?
Yes.
But I was proud to be part of it.
There was a little celebration at the Armory.
It was, yeah, it was that. My
mom.
my mom was up there with me, and
Yeah.
you know, my wife Lisa and all that, and it was very cool. So, I want to thank the city of Somerville for everything it's given me, because it has given me a lot. And I'm a true Somerville person. I love the city, even the old and the new, just like you do. You know, there's a lot of challenges out there, but we're able to come here at Somerville Media Center and get out all the information that you have stored in you, and you've got much more. I'm sure we could. I'm serious about that. You know, making phone calls and calling in. So here we have a beautiful arrangement that Yvette Wilks brought us, and I guess I don't. Not my honor. Maybe it is, but I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Yvette. And for Mary, it looks great in the background here. So I want to thank everybody for watching the show. This is a YouTube show as well. Don't forget we have a YouTube channel. People forget that. I also had a gentleman one day who was screaming at me from the third floor. I think I was picking up trash or doing something. He says, when's the next show? I'm like, you don't even know who I am.
Nice.
It was so cool. It was great. So we're glad that people watch. I know we don't have these shows as frequently as we want to, but it takes a lot to put them together. It really does. And I'm getting tired. I'm joking.
Yeah, I was going to say, I need boundless energy. And I think Somerville Media Center is such an important resource.
It's a great
for all of
place.
us.
It's a great place.
Somerville Media Center.
Yeah, and this building that we're in Union Square, at some point, unfortunately, we will be relocating to another place. Love this place, love the building. Union Square is beautiful, the background, everything's going on. Even with all the construction, all the shows. I started doing a show 4 or 5 years ago, and the construction's still going on, so it's not going to stop. So thank you to Greg Hill, our assistant producer. I want to thank Yvette Wilks for helping us get back on track here. And of course, Mary Cassesso, just full of great information, and you can't get this anywhere, only here. So I just want to say, in unity of strength, thank you. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
It was fun.
It was fun. You did a great job.
Oh, thanks.
The
Thanks
passion
so much.
always comes through. It always does.
You're able to pull it right out of